Today is Friday, January 19th, 2024. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Louisiana moves one step closer to having its second Black congressional district. All we await is the signature of Governor Jeff Landry. We'll give you those details. Also, President Joe Biden announces new student loan relief impacting some 74,000 people. And another $5 billion in student loan debt being wiped away. Also, government shutdown has been averted, well, for a short time. And Nimarata Nikki Haley just can't get out of her way. She screws up again last night when dealing with the issue of racism in America. We'll show you what she said. We'll also show you how Charles Barkley just eviscerated Nikki Haley for her answers. Folks, and a Florida A&M student on a bowling scholarship says it was revoked because she made clear to the coach that she had to study for finals. And then when she says that when her fellow teammates walked out of practice in solidarity with her, they all lost their scholarships. She'll join us on the show as well. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin.
pass. Representative Boyer moves to adopt the title and moves to reconsider the vote.
Folks, this was the Louisiana House where the vote was taken to create the second black congressional district in that particular state. It has been a long fought battle there with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund challenging Louisiana, and they now have their second black congressional district. All it awaits now is the signature of the governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry. And of course, Jeff Landry also had been fighting this when he was the attorney general of the state, but it was made perfectly clear by the courts, look, it's not going to happen, folks. You're losing this battle. And so you had House Speaker Mike Johnson, who was trying to stop this vote from actually taking place because he knows every single vote counts there in Louisiana when it comes to representation in Congress. Now, here's the deal. This is the map right here, folks. And so what they did was they created a district linking Alexandria, linking Baton Rouge. And so putting this whole thing together. And so you have a 6-person delegation in Louisiana. You now are going to have likely 2 Democrats elected. Congressman Troy Carter, who is from New Orleans. He's the lone African-American, the lone Democrat in the delegation. Well, as a result, they now have to create this second district. This is obviously a major deal. We have seen the exact same thing take place in other parts of the country. We're in Alabama, a second black district is being created as well. And we're still waiting to see what happens in Georgia and Florida. My panel, Michael Imhotep, is the host the African History Network show, joins me out of Detroit. Matt Manning, civil rights attorney, joins me out of Corpus Christi, Texas. And Joe Richardson, civil rights attorney, joining me out of Los Angeles. I want to start with you, Matt, because one of the things that people don't quite understand and why this is really a huge deal as well is that what it requires is, and we might even see a pickup in South Carolina, when black members of Congress accept congressional lines where there are fewer African Americans. So what I mean by that is, and Reverend William Barber just sent me this text, and this was what he said. Black legislators don't need 70 to 80% black districts to win. They can win with 55 to 60. Republicans in some states will promise a few black legislators 70, 75 to 80% black districts to protect them, and they agree with it. It's called stacking, packing, and bleaching. We had to fight black legislators in North Carolina when they did it, when we didn't win in 2010, which is why Republicans ended up with a supermajority. But when we went to court, we proved that the congressional maps approved in pre-clearance review at the time by the Holder Justice Department were in fact racist and a violation of the Voting Rights Act and the 15th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. The judge actually said the maps created unconstitutionally constituted legislature forced him to withdraw when they didn't. When they didn't, the courts redrew our congressional representation, which went from 10-4 Republican Democrat to 7-7, an equal split. And so that's the thing right there. And so that's what this map lays out. You pull some black folks from one district to create the second one. Now you expand your power.
Absolutely. And, you know, you touched on it, but the Voting Rights Act basically enshrines the rights of people to have districts where they basically have a realistic chance of electing someone whom they want to elect. And to your point, I mean, that's what's so insidious about gerrymandering, right? You draw these lines so that you can maximize support in a way that is beneficial to you. But what that does inherently is it cuts out people being able to truly participate in the process. Now, I hadn't heard some of those terms in Reverend Dr. William Barber's text, but it makes sense. And I would imagine that that's happened, you know, since time immemorial, especially since Black people have really been involved in the government in the United States. But some legislators who are accepting ratios that are not, you know, advantageous to the people at large. So I'm glad that the courts did the right thing here. And what's sad about this is, you know, when we talk about voting rights, especially in the wake of Dr. King recognizing Dr. King, earlier this week, you know, I gave a speech about voting rights. And I said, the reality is we think about that as being something years ago. decades ago, but it is still something we're fighting now in order for your ballot to actually count. So in order to have a ballot count, you have to have a legislative district where you have a real chance of electing somebody whom you want to support you. So I'm glad that the courts did the right thing in this instance. I am interested in seeing what Jeff Landry does to try to thwart this. But the reality is this is exactly why we have to be so concerned about what happens with state legislatures, because they're the ones who draw these maps. If they don't draw these maps right, then they cut you out of the process where you get to be involved substantially.
Well, the thing here, Joe, again, that's important. The governor had no choice. Look, this thing had gone all the way to the Supreme Court. It got kicked back. They tried to go back to the Fifth Circuit. They tried to get them to review it again. The Fifth Circuit, nope, not going to do it. And the Fifth Circuit is the most conservative circuit court in the country. And even they had to keep telling these white Republicans in Louisiana, just like the other district told, the other circuit told the white Republicans in Alabama, sorry, y'all lost. Y'all lost. You are simply violating the Voting Rights Act. You have to create a second district. They tried everything they could to stop this from happening, and they still lost. Joe, you on mute.
Oh, boy.
There you go. We're good. We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Said you violated the Voting Rights Act. Frankly, what's left of it? It ain't what it used to be, right? Because of the section that was allowed to be kicked at a few years ago. But even at that, this was so egregious. You know, and I guess you can't fault them for going for the gusto, as it were, right? They're going to fight as hard as they can to try to gerrymander their way into staying in the majority, even though they're becoming outnumbered. And at least in this instance, it did not work. Fortunately, we've had the same thing happen in Alabama with the recent Supreme Court case there. And so, yeah, they had nowhere else to go as it pertains to this. The Mike Johnsons of the world and all of these folks weren't crazy about it. But here's where we are. Even after, to your point, after everything they did, they still lost. And so now we have a opportunity for people that are living in a certain area, in a certain state, Black folks in Louisiana, and there are many of them, to have a representative voice, not just one person that's stacked and packed in this one little district, because they've got to have one, and then we'll gerrymander away from them having any of the others. This creates fair representation, and it reminds you of how important voting is and always is and will continue to be. This is a victory, but the fight continues. There's no question about it.
Michael, again, for people who don't understand, we talk about representation. We talk about the difference between having a Democrat in there and a Republican in there. The issues that Black folks are largely concerned with in Louisiana, you're likely going to have addressed by a Democrat than a Republican. This also is huge because when it comes to who controls the House, it may come down to 1 or 2 seats. And then the difference between that is if you have Democrats who are in power, that means that you have Congressional Black Caucus member who are chairs of committee, who have subpoena power, who control the gavel. And I don't think people understand how significant that is. And if Democrats are controlling the House, then you can take another shot at the George Floyd Justice Act. You can take another shot at passing the John Lewis Act. You can begin take shots at passing these things. But as Republicans control the House, none of that stuff is going to take place.
Absolutely. And all you have to do is just look at the first year of the 118th Congress with Republicans in control. They only got 27 bills passed and haven't passed the budget yet either. We know that a third continuing resolution was just passed. I think it was yesterday, signed into law today by President Joe Biden. But this is the chaos caucus. This is huge what's taking place in Louisiana. Louisiana is 1/3 African American. We know that the first African American U.S. Senator was Hiram Rhodes Revels out of Louisiana as well. And this ties into all these things that we talk about on this show, getting bills passed in the House of Representatives, getting the Crown Act passed, getting the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed again, because it did pass the House of Representatives, getting the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed again, because it did pass the House of Representatives, but also understanding how the House is related to the U.S. Senate, and understanding that is not just about the president, but it's also about when it comes to Congress and the U.S. Senate. And then when we talk about getting a budget passed, okay, the White House submits the budget, but it's the annual budget, but it's up to the 12 subcommittees in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate to approve that budget and change what they want in it as well. So all this is connected. So this is very important coming out of Louisiana.
And not only that, this is a huge win, as I said, for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. They were leading in this here. This is the tweet that Janae Nelson sent out. We did it. Our amazing clients, LDF legal team and co-counsel, along with the Louisiana legislature and leadership of Governor Jeff Landry, got passed a bill creating a second congressional district in the state where Black voters can finally elect a candidate of their choosing. And so that's what you see there. And so, again, big news there coming out of Louisiana. All right, folks, hold tight 1 second. When we come back, we're going to talk about student loan debt relief. President Joe Biden makes another announcement, another 74,000 people having their student loan debt wiped out. And we'll tell you exactly what that entails when we come back right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Don't forget, folks, support the work that we do. We're out here covering the stuff that other people ignore every single day, speaking to the issues that matter. And so when you support us, you are supporting Black-owned media, where we are controlling the narrative, controlling the process. And so please, you can send your check and money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037-0196. Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We'll be right back.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, nurses are the backbone of the healthcare industry, and yet only 7% of them are Black. What's the reason for that low number? Well, a lack of opportunities and growth in their profession. Joining us on the next Get Wealthy is Needy Bartonelli. She's going to be sharing exactly what nurses need to do and what approach they need to take ownership of their success.
So the Black Nurse Collaborative really spawned from a place and a desire to create opportunities to uplift each other, those of us in the profession, to also look and reach back and create pipelines and opportunities for other nurses like us.
That's right here on Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
We just have one of the oldest cultures that's desperately needed for mutual salvation. That's the consciousness. We have the keys in our roots to save mankind. We get to see the condition of other countries, other oceans, other cultures. And if we believe in God, a lot of us do, He's telling us if you don't get rid of that stuff that makes somebody superior or inferior and work together for the mutual salvation, everybody's gone.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. This is an opportunity for us to be able to speak to our issues. Y'all better understand something real quick. We ain't going nowhere. It is a continual battle that we see all across this country. Revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be streamed.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
He makes sure that our stories are told.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
Hi, this is Reggie Rock Byfoot. You're watching
Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
Folks, big news out of the nation's capital. President Joe Biden today announced more student loan debt relief that is coming to this country. This here is the tweet that was posted today. My administration approved debt cancellation for another 74,000 student loan borrowers. This brings the total number of people who have gotten their debt canceled under my administration to more than 7.3 million Americans. And in this particular round here is really a lot of public workers, individuals who have been working for the public, and they're having their loans forgiven. And so when you talk about out of the 74,000, some 44,000 fit that category. This was and so we're talking about some $5 billion. This is the statement from the White House that says it right here. And so when you go under here, it says of the 74,000 borrowers approved for relief today, nearly 44,000 of them are teachers, nurses, firefighters, and other individuals who earned forgiveness after 10 years of public service, and close to 30,000 of them are people who have been in repayment for at least 20 years, but never got the relief they earned through income-driven repayment plans. Of course, the Supreme Court ruled against President Biden when he tried to offer student debt relief to everybody. And so what they've done is go back into the programs to understand exactly what has been going on. You'll see in the announcement, it says, my administration is able to deliver relief to these borrowers and millions more because of fixes we made to broken student loan programs that were preventing borrowers from getting relief they were entitled to under the law. And so that's how they've been able to do this. We're almost down to the point of $140 billion in student loan debt that has actually been wiped out under the Biden-Harris administration. And keep in mind, Republicans have made it perfectly clear. They don't want to see any student loan debt relief. This was a campaign promise of President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and now you see them actually going through with that. Joe, I'm going to go to you. When I posted this on my Instagram page and also on my social media accounts, a number of people talked about it. Matter of fact, one lady sent me a direct message. She sent me a direct message. Give me 1 second. I want to pull it up and read it to you because I need people to understand these things are real. This woman said, I put 2 kids through school, no financial aid. They forgave $300,000 in debt for being a public servant. I'm happy. When I posted this on my page as well, just a number of people in the comments said, hey, I'm one of those people. Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Another person said, mine were forgiven in July 2023. Thanks, President Joe Biden. I'm one of those whose student loans were forgiven. Thank you, President Biden. And so it's crazy to have somebody on this page, Joe, say, I don't know anyone that got their loan forgiveness. And then I said, just scroll up the damn page. This is the thing that people need to understand. This does not happen if Biden and Harris are not in the White House.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And remember, they wanted to do more than that. And the Supreme Court actually didn't let them do it. This is a fundamental life-giving program. And what he's tried to do is, based on the Supreme Court decision, actually craft something. It had to be more narrow, but craft something that could help as many people that were really supposed to be helped as possible. So you're talking about firefighters, you're talking about teachers, you're talking about people that do the most incredible work, but don't get the pay, and they're locked into loans that just get bigger. Forbearances, things make those amounts bigger. Folks are still struggling with them. And so this has been an incredible life-giving program. And this is a perfect example of, for those that are walking around saying, well, Joe Biden hadn't done anything for me, with an irony. They might have a paid off student loan. They've got more expanded health care. They've got infrastructure programs. They've got 3.5% unemployment. They've got inflation that's going down, but Joe Biden doesn't do anything for us. So, at some point, people are going to have to make sure they understand what it is that's going on. But the Biden administration has to do the best job possible about getting the word out at the risk of tooting its own horn and letting them know, reminding them who was it that did want to do this, and who was it that didn't want to do this, and who is it that wants to do even more, but he's actually trying to work within the law, including what the Supreme Court has done to maximize this benefit.
And I'll tell you right now, Michael, some of these people really drive me crazy. Somebody posted, and this is a very prominent person, I haven't received any of these billions. Well, guess what? It ain't just you. Then somebody else goes, I just checked my account. I wasn't selected. We still have work to do, Mr. President. Another person goes, I don't know anyone that got their loan forgiveness. Another guy goes, so another woman goes, this is laughable. And my response was, so $140 billion in loan forgiveness is laughable. I mean, the thing here, and matter of fact, there's one guy who complained. He said that he was against. He said that he paid off his student loans. He never got a refund for that. I said, well, hell, I buy my own groceries. I don't ask for a refund when other people are getting food assistance.
Yeah, Roland, when you have people who complain about student loan forgiveness, most of these people don't complain about paycheck protection loans that were forgiven by the federal government. And the average paycheck protection loan was much larger than forgiving what Biden Harris were originally going to do, which was up to $20,000 forgiving student loans, the executive order. OK, then you have Republicans. So if what Biden Harris are doing is laughable, then what Republican senators who tried to strip Biden of the ability to be able to discharge student loan, then that must be hysterical. OK, so when you look at, because you have 5 senators, including Mitt Romney, who last year tried to get a bill passed in the Senate to strip the president of the ability to discharge student loan debt. So this is good. They're building on what they've done. According to the article from Forbes.com, more than $136 billion so far has been forgiven, 3.7 million Americans, and they're going to continue to build upon this. Now, I have to say this. If more people had voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, you'd have a 6-3 liberal Supreme Court, most likely, as opposed to a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court. And that 6-3 liberal Supreme Court most likely would have upheld President Joe Biden's executive order, which would have discharged even more student loan debt. So this is an example of how elections have consequences.
Look, they absolutely have consequences. And I get it, Matt. Everybody wants to get something. But for anybody to somehow suggest, that's not a lot, that's not a big deal, this is a pittance. I'm sitting here looking at a person who posted that they are a public school teacher and they had more than $150,000 in student loan debt forgiven. Now, I'm sorry, okay, just because everybody didn't get their student loan debt forgiven does not mean it's not important. It's $140 billion and 3.7 million Americans.
And it's purchasing power. Michael and Joe spoke to the issues, I think, brilliantly. But the problem that we have when we talk about student loans is we have created a real dichotomy between those who, took federal assistance for school and those who didn't. And it's very much looked at in an individualistic way. The reason that's problematic is that our entire economy and our society benefits, 1, from a more educated populace, and 2, from a populace that has disposable income to participate in the market, buying goods and services. So really, on the whole, there's a benefit to student loan forgiveness. But one of the things that we don't talk about enough, and one of the biggest components of this, is college costs. So it's not just taking out money to go to school. It's the fact that the costs to go to school have ballooned, extraordinarily, not only in the last decade, but in the last several decades. A few years ago, my middle son was born and I went to talk to my banker. I said, how much would it cost for me to send him to Howard? He said it would cost $450,000, right, in about 18 years. And the idea that my banker can look at me and tell me it will cost $500,000 for me to send my son to my alma mater is extraordinary. And the reality is that is what we're talking about when we talk about federal student loan debt against the backdrop of college costs. So I say that to say I'm elated that the Biden-Harris administration has found a way to work around the Supreme Court's decision. But we as a society have to have a larger conversation about the benefit of an educated populace, particularly as we see China and some other countries around the world as, existential threats, essentially. So the more educated we are, the better our society is. And we need to look at it from a collectivist view rather than an individualistic view. And to that end, I think, your point about buying groceries and the food stamps corollary is brilliant, because the reality of it is, there are people who are crowing about tax dollars that are going towards this, who not only won't be materially affected, but who find a way to bend over backwards to make a benefit somewhere else be okay. So I think we as a society need to see this as a benefit to all of us. And once we do that, we'll see improvements in society.
And people need to understand the cost of college, the cost of a college education, that is determined on the state level. When we talk about public institutions, not private colleges, we also need to recognize, like, for all these people who love running their mouths, I need them to understand that wasn't always the case. And if you want to blame somebody who killed free college, did I just say that? Yes, folks, there are people who grew up in this country who lived in California and New York State and other places where they went to college for free. Guess who was the person who said, nah, we can't have that? It was Ronald Reagan. That's right. One of the advisors for Ronald Reagan, they said, if we allow there to be free college, we're going to have an educated proletariat. They didn't want that, folks. They did not want an educated populace. You see it right here. You will see it right here. Okay. In 1970, Ronald Reagan was running for re-election as governor of California. He had first won in 1966 with confrontational rhetoric towards the University of California public college system and executed confrontational policies when in office. In May of 1970, Reagan had shut down all 28 UC and Cal State campuses in the midst of student protests against the Vietnam War. On October 29th, less than a week before the election, his education advisor, Roger A. Freeman, spoke at a press conference to defend him. And when you look at this here, this is what Roger Freeman said. He said, point blank, he said that we are in danger of producing an educated proletariat that's dynamite. We have to be selective on who we allow to go through higher education. If not, we will have a large number of highly trained and unemployed people. And you saw, it says right here, the two most menacing institutional sources of the danger described by Freeman were obviously those two great public university systems charging no tuition, the University of California and the City University of New York. Reagan wiped out free tuition at those universities in California. And what then began to happen, we then begin to see, Michael, Joe, and Matt, we begin to see all of a sudden state legislatures begin to make cuts to higher education. As a result, universities then begin to say, we got to raise tuition. It also then became very similar, Michael, to the pharmaceutical industry. It became, wait a minute, we can jack up the prices and these folks can just keep taking out more loans to pay for the education, helping the banking system, helping the banks and all of them. And that's how you got to the point of where we are now with education being sky high, where even at public universities, it's costing $15,000, $18,000, $20,000 a year to get an education.
Yeah, Roland, I read that article from The Intercept when it came out, and not just, I don't think people really understand, or some people really don't understand how devastating, how detrimental to America the Ronald Reagan administration was, the 2 years of Reagan. And even going back to when Reagan was governor of California, the reason what contributed to the high divorce rates in this country was the Family Law Act of 1969 that Reagan signed into law that allowed people to get divorced based upon irreconcilable differences. And then that spread across the country as well. That's traced back to Reagan in 1969 when he's governor of California. But something else happened very important in the Reagan administration, first term of the Reagan administration. The Heritage Foundation, right around 1980, right around 1980, they put out a book that contained 2,000 policies that they wanted the Reagan administration to adopt. And Ali Velshi talked about this a few weeks ago on MSNBC. The Reagan administration adopted 60% of those policies in the first term around Reagan. Well, the Heritage Foundation is running the same play called Project 2025, and they're putting out policies, as well as allies of Trump, putting out policies that they want a possible Trump administration to adopt in 2025. So we got to research this. All this is in the history, and all this turns on the vote. This is why voting is so important. Okay, so people have to go research this. I hope everybody goes and reads that article that you just showed.
I mean, look, the bottom line here, Joe, is you have to always, and I'm a firm believer in this, you got to go back to how we got to this point. And too often that's not what we want to do. It's like, well, I don't know what happened here. And so it was by design. We have seen the gutting of public education in this country. While that was happening, we saw the de-emphasizing of the trades as well. And so now what we have in this country, we have a massive education imbalance. And so we've got a lot of people who are highly educated, who have spent a lot of money going to school, but when they go into those careers, they're never going to be able to make enough money to pay for those loans. The reality is you should not be an English major in America and you want to be a teacher and your education costs you $150,000. That is simply insane.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. Among other things, it's hard because things cost. Education costs. You want your child to have a great liberal arts education. I just got done paying for my daughter to go to Northwestern, and it was cool, but it was no joke. Me and my wife were looking at each other saying, I don't know how people do this more than once, and don't know how we did it, keeping it real. But the fact of the matter is it becomes cost preclusive to get degrees in certain educational areas because you can't come out and make the money that you need to make, even though you want to be passionate about the work that you're doing. Teachers are unappreciated. Some of the greatest, careers out there are very underappreciated from a financial standpoint. Fortunately, my daughter's able to do something that doesn't pay a lot of money, but she doesn't need a lot of money. But if she had borrowed a whole lot of money, then she'd be in a whole nother situation in a whole nother category. So it becomes very difficult and a self-perpetuating situation when education has gotten so sky high, so much so that as it pertains to certain degrees and certain things, it becomes cost preclusive. So now what do? Do you go to graduate school and get more debt potentially so that you can have a better job? You really get to be caught up in a bit of a catch-22 where basically you've been put in a box that it's very, very hard to crawl out of, as it were, and you are actually in the educated category. And now it makes people look at people getting educated and saying, well, what the heck are you doing that for? That doesn't make any sense. Now, there are other alternatives, theoretically speaking, going to the service, technical professions, which we absolutely need to encourage and support, but it shouldn't be preclusive, the cost of going to college to going to college. And so something like this that helps to equalize a bit, so people that are in a particular situation is good. However, to the point that Matt just made, we have to make a larger discussion about how we approach this situation long term, because the problem still is that it costs too much to get educated, so much so that it may not be worth it for a lot of people that are going to college.
That really is the struggle, and we've never. You're not seeing massive conversations where legislators are meeting to confront the high cost of public education.
No, I'm assuming that was for me, Roland.
Yeah.
They aren't. Yeah, they're not having those conversations, at least not that I've seen. And first, let me congratulate you and your family, Joe. Northwestern is a fine institution. Congrats to your daughter. But outside of that, notwithstanding that, we don't know that they're having those conversations. And we as Americans are not having the right conversation, because we are, again, seeing it as, I saw one of the comments, someone said, "What about me?" should be our national slogan. And that's funny, because that's really the way we approach this conversation, despite the fact that not only are we not talking about college costs, and not only are our politicians not providing any real solutions to that, but the fact that you look at my generation, generations after me, and even a little ahead of me, every single student has been imbued with this story from the beginning that you have to go to college to be successful. We know that isn't true. We know you can have an extraordinarily successful career in the trades and other things. But the reality is we have imbued people with this belief that they've got to go to college. And the reality of our economy is more jobs now are requiring more education. So there is a gulf between what the market is requiring and what people are able to do, because the providers of that colleges are making costs go through the roof. And that's really what we need to talk about is cost control, the same way we do with other things, cost control for really important pharmaceuticals or other things that we deem as a society, things that should not be commodified to the extent that the free market is just determining those costs and, to hell with them not being regulated to a certain extent. I think we as a society have to see a benefit to education to the extent that we require those costs to stay down. And, I'm glad you made the distinction about private colleges versus public colleges. That's extremely important. Howard is a private school. It may cost differently than your public schools. However, the University of Texas at Austin, my parents' alma mater, is extraordinarily cost prohibitive for most Texans. It is not cheap to go to UT Austin. It's hard to get in. And if you get in, it costs a boatload of money for most people. So this is a conversation we have to be having about public schools, private schools, community college. And we also have to make it, I think, incentivized on a much larger scale for students to limit how much time they're spending in college through dual credit and other programs. And I know there are a lot of programs to that end, but if your high school senior can graduate with half of their collegiate time done, then you're talking about a relatively smaller amount of loans they may have to take out. But we need to be talking about democratizing education. And the last point I wanted to note is from that Ronald Reagan note. You notice he said we don't want to have an educated proletariat, right? That's very hearkening back to Marxism principles and socialism and vilifying this idea that the collective do better. And that's part of the problem. We can't look at it as an individualistic thing, rather one that rising tide lifts all boats.
And there you go. All right, folks. Got to go to a break. We come back. My goodness. Y'all, Nikki Haley, Nimarata, Lord have mercy. How hard this woman creates more problems for herself than I've ever seen in my life. Wait until I show y'all what happened last night at the CNN town hall in New Hampshire. And Charles Barkley even weighed in. And we're going to tell you what Charles had to say as well. My goodness, you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered right here on the Black Star Network. Back in a moment.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
My name is Lena Charles, and I'm from Opelousas, Louisiana. Yes, that is Zydeco capital of the world.
My name is Margaret Chappelle. I'm from Dallas, Texas, representing the Urban Trivia Game.
It's me, Sherry Shepherd, and you know what you watch.
Roland Martin on Unfiltered.
All right, fam. Nimarata Nikki Haley cannot get out of her own way. Lord, she don't know how to answer these questions when it comes to racism in America. Last night, CNN had a town hall in New Hampshire, and she was asked again, and Paula Nimarata screwed up the answer again. I swear, I like this ain't that hard, but she making this thing hard. All right, y'all, check this out.
I want to ask you about a comment you made earlier this week. You said that America has, quote, never been a racist country, unquote. Protections for the institution of slavery were written into the U.S. Constitution. The White House was built with slave labor. Your home state of South Carolina seceded from the Union, fought a war to defend the enslavement of black people. I understand you don't think America is a racist country now, but we're here at a college. Do you really think as a historical matter, America has never been a racist country?
I mean, think about what you're saying. First of all, I will tell you, when you look at, the Declaration of Independence, it was that, men are created equal with unalienable rights, right? That was what we all knew. But what I look at it as is I was a brown girl that grew up in a small rural town. We had plenty of racism that we had to deal with. But my parents never said we lived in a racist country. And I'm so thankful they didn't. Because for every brown and black child out there, if you tell them they live or were born in a racist country, you're immediately telling them they don't have a chance. And my parents would always say, you may have challenges. And yes, there will be people who are racist, but that doesn't define what you can do in this country. And so I think it's important that we tell all kids that, look, America is not perfect. We have our stains. We know that. But our goal should always be to make today better than yesterday. It's hugely important. And that's the problem I have, is we have too many people with this national self-loathing. It is killing our country. We have got to go back to loving America. We are blessed because that little brown girl in that small rural town in South Carolina, she grew up to become the first female minority governor in history. She then went on to be UN ambassador, and now she's running for president of the United States. I want every brown and black child to see that and say, no, I don't live in a country that was formed on racism. I live in a country where they wanted all people to be equal and to make sure that they had life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, but just to push back a bit, because I was a history major in New Hampshire, you're talking about the ideals of America. But America was founded institutionally on many racist precepts, including slavery.
But when you look at said all men are created equal, I think the intent was to do the right thing. Now, did they have to go fix it along the way? Yes, but I don't think the intent was ever that we were going to be a racist country. The intent was everybody was going to be created equally. And as we went through time, they fixed the things that were not all men are created equal. They made sure women became equal too. All of these things happened over time. But I refuse to believe that the premise of when they formed our country was based on the fact that it was a racist country to start with. I refuse to believe that. I have to know in my heart and in everybody's heart that we live in the best country in the world, and we are a work in progress, and we've got a long way to go to fix all of our little kinks. But I truly believe our founding fathers had the best of intentions when they started, and we fixed it along the way, and we should always look at it that way.
Where did she go to school?
Okay, but before I weigh in, before I weigh in, oh
man,
the night before, Charles Barkley, he's on the show with Gayle King called King Charles. Barkley spoke about Nimarata Nikki Haley.
Brian, we've never been a racist country. Our goal is to make sure that today is better than yesterday.
We asked people out on the street about that tonight. We didn't find anyone that could agree with that.
Not
statement.
anybody with common sense.
Yeah, we didn't find anybody.
Well, you know what? I've been having a hard time trying to decide who I'm gonna vote for.
Mm-hmm.
So Nikki Haley's the leader in the clubhouse because
she was a leader in your clubhouse.
Because she's 100% correct. If you forget about slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, anti-Semitism, Asian hate that's been going on in this country, America's been smooth sailing.
Yeah.
You know, that was.
I think a lot of people were surprised.
Well,
by
no. First of all, you can't be surprised. That was just stupid. America was built on racism.
Mm-hmm.
First of all,
America was certainly built on slavery.
Well,
yeah, certainly that. Yeah.
But listen, you can criticize a country. This is the greatest country in the world, but you can still criticize it.
Yeah.
Anybody who thinks we don't have racism. You turn on the TV every single day, there's racism.
Mm-hmm.
And for her, somebody who wants to be the president of the United States to say something that's stupid. And that's just stupid. Like, when you heard it, you're like, oh, can you, I wish I could go back on my TV because, you know, when some people, somebody.
To rewind it to see,
because you can't think that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't think that racism doesn't exist in this country. Like, you know, right now, like I say, America was built on racism. Like I say, segregation, Jim Crow, slavery.
Yeah.
Even now, we got anti-Semitism that's through the roof.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years, Asian people have been getting mistreated.
Well, she has a town hall tomorrow night, Jake Tapper.
You know what I want to do?
What?
Listen, I want all the black people here in New York. We're going up to New Hampshire. We're going to have the whole audience black. That's what we're going to do. And when Jake Tapper said we got a question, we're going to all raise our hand at the same time. If I could get, it's cold out here right now. If I could get.
Something tells me there's not very many black people in New Hampshire, so maybe you might have to cover New York.
Well, because I think that the reason she said that everything's rosy with black people, she's been in New Hampshire and Iowa for the last 2 months. She ain't seen no black people.
All right, so I mean, here's what is so utterly illogical, is that no, if you tell a black or brown kid that America has been a racist country, you're telling them they can't succeed. No, that ain't it. You're telling them the truth. I mean, my parents were very clear. And as I studied American history, what this nation was, that didn't mean I can't succeed. That didn't mean, oh, my life is over. But what it meant was I better have an understanding of the reality. And as I then went through, matriculated through life, guess what? I encountered racism. I encountered bigotry. And so she wants to have this rose-colored view. And that stuff all sound cute and sound great until you get one of them kids who all of a sudden comes face to face with racism. Oh, my parents never told us America was racist. Nikki, you lying. Your daddy, your Indian daddy, could not get hired anywhere in South Carolina except at a HBCU. Your mama taught in public schools with black kids. Your mama made dresses, Nikki. White women wouldn't buy any clothes your mama made. Who bought your mama's dresses? Black people. She is on record as saying the house that they bought, they had it in the deed. You can't invite no black people over. You can't drink. And when you sell this house, you got to sell it back to the previous owner. Nikki, what the hell is that other than racism? But see, what this is, Joe, is this desire to make white folk feel so comfortable. And let's be real clear. The Republican Party is the party of white people. And these people don't believe in this. They don't believe in the reality of racism, and they love to live in denial when it comes to the truth.
Nikki Haley didn't have to be a one or another proposition. You can acknowledge that there is racism, and it's nuts to not acknowledge that we weren't built on racism, even if you don't think we're racist anymore. That could have been her middle ground. You can acknowledge that racism exists, but still say, my mom and my dad told me, even though they made a decision not to tell me those things because of what they knew and how they were going to approach it. That doesn't mean that it's not there. And that doesn't mean that we're not individually accountable. If we've got to be twice as good to get half as far, then that's our reality. And in her case, maybe she's done it. But you don't actually have to look around and act like something is other than what it is. She says, I want to live for tomorrow and not today. Well, if I'm driving from here to LA County or to San Francisco, I might want to get to San Francisco, but I have to start from where I am. Here's how we started. Black folk were 3/5 of a person. If you watch the movie Dazed and Confused, the teacher in there says, remember what you're celebrating is that aristocratic slave-owning white men didn't want to pay their taxes. No, we started off a little bit less than ideal. We can admit that. We were built on racism. That doesn't mean that you can't be accountable. That doesn't mean that we haven't made progress. That doesn't mean that we're not the greatest country in the world. We've got black billionaires, but you can deal with it for what it actually is. But, at the end of the day, Nikki Haley's looking at her watch and she sees that South Carolina is coming up in a second, and she needs to do real, real well in New Hampshire and in South Carolina. But, meanwhile, back at the ranch, South Carolina is who got it cracking when it was time for succeeding from the Union as it pertains to the Confederacy. So she's got to come out how she's got to come out. And this is going to end up being her gripe. Even Republicans ought to look at this. Nikki Haley wants to be all things to all people, okay? And it's very, very hard for her to just sit and to take a stand about something and to be in disagreement on something because she's worried about it. And the biggest irony is it's still the fight after all of this is over with for distant second place.
I just crack up laughing back at the silliness that keeps coming out of her mouth. And it's like, girl, you keep answering the dumbass question like that, you're going to keep getting the question.
That's true. And what I love about this show is things that you say like, yo, Indian daddy, yo, Indian mama. Sorry, I'm struggling to keep that one together. But
I mean, you're right. They immigrated from India.
Oh, no, right. You didn't say anything wrong. It was just, I love our people. Thank you for who you are. But notwithstanding that, and I saw the other brothers trying not to laugh. It was just funny. But in any event, what I think is so strange about this is from the same group of people who want to be textualists and legalists of the Constitution, which had black people
original constructionists
a literal fraction of a human being, right? 60% of a person to tabulate how we're going to count population in this country. So from an objective standpoint, from an originalist, textualist standpoint, the founding document of this country on which we have modeled all of our government and built our government says that the four men on this screen were not full people. So to Joe's point, how at any point you cannot say racism was part and parcel with the inception of this country and is still an integral part of this country to the extent that we're still debating birthright citizenship in 2024. See also, right, when we talk about racism, we're not just talking about out and out racism in the circumstance where I hate you because you're a certain color. We're talking about dog whistles, i.e. immigration, right? So this is a racist country. We all know that. And I think there is a way to address that and pander to white people, which is what Nikki Haley's intending to do. But you suspend disbelief and you suspend all logic when you don't call a spade a spade. And the reality is this is a racist country. What I think is brilliant, though, and insidious about this messaging is Nikki Haley, maybe unintentionally, because she's trying to appeal to Stepford wives and to the demure idea of what a white woman is, I believe, in her whole affect, how she dresses, how she talks. But the hustle here is they have found a way to conflate everything with being woke, including the truth. And the truth of this country is it's a racist country. And to Joe's point, I think she could have been truthful and then been aspirational. Yes, this country was founded on racism. However, I choose to look towards the future. You can do that and at least acknowledge what we all see as the elephant in the room. But not to do so, you're able to do so because the people to whom you're speaking, i.e. not the four men on the screen, don't want you to acknowledge that, lest you be lumped in with woke and everything that we're seeing across the country. So this is full of it, and we know that. But also, thank you for making me laugh.
Bottom line is, every time that child talks, Michael, she get 2 words. Girl, bye.
Yeah, Roland. I saw the videos. I posted them on my Instagram page. And first of all, in that whole, when especially Republicans have this conversation about racism or the fact, or they say systemic racism doesn't exist, they never want to define what racism is. Racism is not a feeling. Racism is not people not liking you. That's bigotry. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon a race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. That's what racism is. Racism is a power structure. The reason why Republicans, especially Black Republicans, won't admit that racism or systemic racism exists is because they have absolutely no policies to deal with it. So they want to pretend like it doesn't exist. Oh, that was something in the past. She doesn't even want to admit that in the past during 246 years of slavery, that America was a racist country. Then she wants to talk about all men were created equal. Yeah, but they were talking about all white men. They weren't talking about the Africans they were keeping enslaved. They weren't talking about white women. Okay, so even when she says that, it's disingenuous. And then I've got to. Also, I encourage people, when we talk about Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, was known as the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787 that was debated at the Philadelphia Convention of 1787. I encourage people to read this article from theroot.com called Three-Fifths Clause, Why Its Taint Persists. It's by historian Paul Finkelman, who I've interviewed on the African History Network show, which goes deep into a deeper understanding of that Three-Fifths Clause and the debate that was taking place, because the South wanted the full population of enslaved Africans counted. The northern colonies or states were saying, wait a second, if you count the full population, that's going to give you total dominance in the House of Representatives. So some were saying, let's count 50% of the population of enslaved Africans. Others were saying, let's count 3/4. Okay, they compromised and said 3/5 because the South wanted 100% counted because they wanted full dominance. So we need to go back and really study the history and what that debate was about.
From one doctor to the next.
Well,
did they even send my lab work? Wait, was I supposed?
Requires people.
Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/.
And I want to remind people of something. And while we were talking, I was sitting here looking at that. I just want to remind people of this. And let me set it up. One of the first, when you talk about whenever Nikki Haley run her mouth, and all these fools who say they for Trump, like today, Senator Tim Scott, he endorsed Trump. When Donald Trump was elected, one of the first bills that they took up was the repeal of discrimination in car lending. It was one of the first. I'm talking about when he became president and they control the House. It was one of the first bills they took up. Out of all the stuff you can take up, they wanted to overturn an Obama administration rule when it came to ending discrimination in auto lending. This is a flashback for those of y'all who may have forgotten.
That we're making America great every day in every way. And the best way to do that is to stop talking about discrimination and start talking about the nation. We're coming together as a people in spite of what you say. Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Texas reserves, the gentlelady from California.
Thank you very much. The gentleman, Mr. Kelly, please do not leave because I want you to know that I am more offended as an African-American woman than you will ever be. And this business about making America great again, it is your president that's dividing this country. And don't talk to me about the fact that we don't understand what happens on the automobile. No, I will not yield. No, I will not yell.
Okay.
Don't tell me that we don't understand. That's the attitude that's been given toward women time and time again.
The gentlelady will suspend. The chair wishes to remind all members that they are to address their remarks to the chair.
I
Gentlelady will
respect the
continue.
chair, but don't stop me in the middle when you didn't stop him in the middle. And so I shall continue. Don't you dare talk to me like that and think that somehow women don't understand what goes on the floor of automobile dealers.
Minded to direct her remarks to the chair. The
And
gentlelady
I
will
am
continue
saying that
in
I will
order.
continue to do that. However, I don't appreciate that you did not interrupt him when he was making those outrageous remarks about him knowing more about discrimination than I know about discrimination. I resent that, and I resent the remark about making America great again. He's down here making a speech for this dishonorable president of the United States of America. Having said that, I reserve the balance of my time, and no, I do not yield not 1 second to you. Not 1 second. Not 1 second to you.
That was again. So for all these people who are like, oh, those things are so long ago.
We just witnessed
that was 2017, and the Republicans wanted to get rid of those provisions.
And what I mean by that is that
block
the white dude said he understood discrimination.
In Carlinden.
Now, we need to read between the lines. When a white person says they understand discrimination, they're talking about against white people
it's
and
about
against white
messaging
interests
as well. Okay, we
and
want
white
to get rid of
supremacist
this,
values.
but we
Let's be
want
real
to do
clear.
it in a certain
If we listen
order,
to
in a
it
certain way.
with logic or with some type of utopian perspective, you'll get lost. He means discriminating against us because our numbers are dwindling and we don't want to lose power.
But Auntie had something for him, didn't she? That's my congresswoman.
Yes, she did. All right, y'all, hold tight 1 second. We come back. I saw this story today done by my man Scotty, his off-script YouTube channel, and it deals a FAMU student, a top bowler, was kicked off the team because he said, "I'm focusing on my finals." Then her teammates came to her defense. They got rid of all their scholarships. What the hell is going on at Florida A&M? I'll discuss that next on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
We just have one of the oldest cultures that's desperately needed for mutual salvation. That's the consciousness. We have the keys in our roots to save mankind. We get to see the condition of other countries, other oceans, other cultures. And if we believe in God, a lot of us do, He's telling us if you don't get rid of that stuff that makes somebody superior or inferior and work together for the mutual salvation, everybody's gone.
On a next, A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie, we talk about a hard, cold fact. Not all healthcare is created equal in this country, especially if you're a person of color.
So many of us, Black families, we rely upon each other heavily. A lot of us aren't necessarily sure how to best communicate with our healthcare providers.
How to take charge and balance the scales. Your life may depend on it. That's next on A Balanced Life on Black Star Network.
Next on The Frequency, we're talking about racism. My guest, Danica Moore, comes on to discuss her fight against racism that she and her daughter face.
The thing about racism, you can't outrun it. You can't control it. You can't predict when it's going to happen to you or your seed.
She's also going to give us solutions on how to handle the situation. That's here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
Hey, it's John Murray, the executive producer of the new Sherry Shepherd Talk Show. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, folks, there are always different stories that will catch my eye, and then I'll be like, what the hell is going on? And so earlier today, I was watching my man Scotty on his off-script TV, watching his YouTube channel, and he was talking about all the different things that are going at Florida A&M University. Their head football coach left. The AD wanted to bring in somebody else. Alumni pushed back. Now they got a search committee, and it's like they had board of regents meetings. There's all kind of drama about what's going on at FAMU. But then he told a story about this young lady, Shamoria Johnson. Shamoria is a top bowler. She's a bowling scholarship. And she took to her TikTok and Instagram to share with people about how she no longer is on the bowling team and how all the bowling team is gone. So according to Shamoria, she won honors as a bowler of the week. I mean, she's a very good bowler. And so she responded to an email from her head coach with regards to practice or something along those lines. And she responded that she was focusing on her finals. Well, the coach didn't like it and then confronted her at practice. Well, then Shamoria responded. And then the coach said, "You're off the team." Well, when she walked out of practice, her fellow bowling members, teammates, left with her. As a result, they got rid of all of their scholarships and they brought in a whole new bowling team of walk-ons. Shamoria Jones is right now on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Shamoria, glad to have you here. And so what's crazy to me, so you said, I want to focus on my finals, my finals. And so what was the coach asking you to do? Devote more time to practice and skip studying?
Hi, thank you first of all for having me on here. Basically what happened was it was dead week. So it was the week before the final week of classes. We'd come back from Thanksgiving break vacation, and typically how it goes in the previous years with our previous coaches, we would have dead week and finals week off so that we could focus on studying for our final assignments and final projects. Because at Florida A&M, a lot of my colleagues and myself included, we don't just have finals week exams. We have final projects, we have group projects, we have papers that we need to turn in before actual finals week. And so the week before, on November 29th, the week of November 29th, my teammates were texting the coach and letting her know, hey, I have this project, I have this presentation, I have this study group, I won't be able to come into practice. And for the rest of my teammates, she told everybody, okay, no problem, good luck. But I texted her on November 29th and I said, hey, coach, I won't be able to come into practice on Monday, December 4th, because I have 2 final papers due that I will need to work on. Unlike the rest of my teammates, I got no response back. I didn't get a text message back. And instead, she sent us an email where she was stating that we needed to manage our time better, and being a student athlete, we should be able to balance our schoolwork and our academic work. So having homework or studying is not an excuse to miss practice. And when I read that email, I felt a little bit anxious because I knew that I needed that time to work on my final paper. I am an English major, so it is quite a bit of work. So I responded to her email, and my intention was to emphasize that I really prioritize my academics, and seeing how this is the #1 public HBCU, it's a very rigorous academic setting. And so I ended the email saying that I would prioritize my academics as a student athlete. And I also referenced one of the rules from the women's bowling team rules, where it stated that being a student is the priority. That was the only bolded rule on the rule sheet. And I didn't get a response to that email either. Instead, I just was dismissed from the team.
Whoa. So, okay, here's where I'm confused. Did y'all have any bowling tournaments during this period?
No, sir. We actually had our last tournament it was before Thanksgiving break. Our last tournament of the semester was before Thanksgiving break, and it was the Alabama State tournament on November 16th. And that's the tournament that I actually was MVP of. I came in first place overall individually in that tournament. And that also allowed me to get SWAC Bowler of the Week. And I had also that same weekend been recognized at the Florida Classic for being one of FAMU's only athletes on Bright Future Scholarship.
Okay. And so you've got finals coming up. And it's not like you are neglecting practicing your craft. Your deal is, hey, I gotta take care of my academic business or I can't bowl. So it's sort of useless saying, hey, I gotta come to all these practices. And first of all, how many practices a week are we talking about?
We practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with weight training on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we were supposed to practice on Saturdays and Sundays as well. But FAMU Athletics was unable to accommodate our practice at the on-campus lanes at Gallimore Lanes because of some conflict between student activities versus athletics. They wanted us to travel into the city to practice on Saturdays and Sundays, but our coach was unable or unwilling to provide transportation. And that is something that should be provided if we're traveling and practicing off campus. So,
okay. So what you said is, hey, I can't make it to practice on Monday because I have 2 papers due. You didn't say, I'm not going to show up to weight training on Tuesday. I'm not going to show up to practice on Wednesday. I'm not going to show up to weight training on Thursday or practice on a Friday. I need Monday to finish my papers.
Right. That's what I said. And I admittedly, I was really nervous about asking for that day off because I understand that like the whole idea is that I should be able to balance my academics and my athletics. And I have been able to. I have one of the highest GPAs in athletics, 3.7. I've been consistently on the athletic director honor roll. And our bowling team has the highest team GPA in athletics. So I thought that maybe if I showed her that I really
you thought that was kind of important.
Yeah.
Okay. So all right. So and this is Coach Capri Howard, who is the head bowling coach. Bowled at I think Jackson State, has never been a coach before. This is her first head coaching job. So here's what I'm trying to understand right here. So when was the practice where the coach confronted you, said you're off, and your fellow teammates walked out with you in solidarity with you? When did that happen?
Yeah, so I sent her I sent the email stuff happened on November 29th, and she texted me the next day on Thursday asking if I could come in for a meeting in her office, but it was our NCAA mandated day off, so we ended up not having the meeting. And she said she wanted to meet with me the next day after practice. So it was December 1st during practice, yeah.
So she then tells you, sorry, you're off the team?
Yes. I went into practice and I was really nervous for the past 2 days about meeting with her. It hasn't been the easiest to transition with a new coach, but I've been trying to do my best all semester to just kind of be happy, be there, be the energy. And I was really nervous that I was going to get in trouble, but I didn't think that I would get dismissed. And it wasn't until her boss came into practice, the senior executive for external relations, Mr. Breon Higgins. He came into practice, and that's when I knew, okay, so this is going to be a serious meeting. And they took me into the billiards room of the bowling alley, and they told me, well, Capri, Mr. Higgins didn't say anything the entire meeting. He didn't even look me in the eyes. But Capri said that I have been disrespectful all season, and that my last email was entirely disrespectful, that she no longer wishes to work with me because my energy is a cancer to the team. And yeah, I didn't.
And so that happens. And then when your fellow teammates find out what happened, they leave practice in solidarity with you.
Yes, because I asked her what was disrespectful and if we could have a conversation and she could clarify with me what I've been doing wrong. And she told me that sending that email in the first place was disrespectful because I had all my teammates on there, but I was only replying to her email that was a team email.
Right.
And that, yeah, she said that I had all my teammates on there and that I did too much and that I didn't even have to do all of that. So
go ahead.
I was just going to say I walked out of the room and I looked at all my teammates were looking at me and I looked at them and I was like, I'm no longer your teammate. And everybody was just really shocked and they just started packing up their stuff. And they said, well, if you have to leave practice, we're leaving practice too, because what does she mean kicking you off for sending an email without even a conversation about it?
And so your fellow teammates leave out, and then they find out that all of their scholarships have been revoked.
Yes. So my teammates walk out with me. And as we're walking out, Mr. Higgins calls behind us and he says, well, you guys know that if you walk out of that door, he said, if you know that you walk out of that door, then you won't get your scholarship back. We can take your scholarship away. And everybody just kept walking because we didn't think that that was something that they could do. We were under the impression that our scholarships were protected by a contract. And the only way to break that contract is if you physically signed saying that you voluntarily do not want to be in that contract anymore. So and then they checked their portals and their scholarships weren't there anymore. And we weren't getting any clarification. We weren't getting any documentation. And before we knew it, it was winter break.
So, so you come back. So are you still enrolled at Florida A&M?
Yes, I'm still enrolled at Florida A&M. Part of my dismissal, Capri did say that NCAA rules is that if a coach dismisses you from the team, then you are supposed to be able to keep your scholarship for the whole year. So I'm supposed to be able to keep my scholarship for the spring. But what they were trying to say with my teammates was because they walked out of practice, that they voluntarily gave up their scholarships.
And some of them have since left the university.
Yeah, so one of my teammates, she transferred to another university because she was afraid that she would just simply not be able to afford school. And my other two teammates thought that maybe some change could happen in this first, in these first couple of days.
Right.
But they got to school and they didn't have their scholarships and they weren't getting any help. So they made the best decision for themselves and their families to go back home.
Are you and your family considering suing Florida A&M?
I'm not sure about that.
Are you planning to stay at Florida A&M after you finish the spring semester?
I would love to stay here at FAMU, and that's the most disheartening and sad part about this is this has really grown to be my home. That's the only I came here because I was told that this would become my home, and it has. And in the English department, I love my professors. I love my peers. I'm in organizations, and I feel stabbed in the chest because it feels like I have to make a decision on if I'm going to stay here and not have my voice be heard, or if I'm going to go somewhere else and continue my career.
And do you still want to bowl?
I do still want to bowl, but I understand that Coach Howard, she specifically said to me that she does not want to work with me. So I'm not going to put myself into a position.
So I'm confused. So she doesn't want to work with her number one bowler.
Yes.
Gotcha. I did reach out to Florida A&M. I called the athletic department. I left a message for their head of communications. Have not heard back from anybody. I called about 5.5 hours ago, so there's ample time for them to get back to me. And so I would love for Florida A&M to respond so they can explain what happened here. Because now, last question for you. She said you were a Cancer. Did the two of you have any run-ins during the year? Did she write you up? Did she document any issues the two of you had in this semester?
I believe what she was referring to as me as a cancer to the team is that I'm very outspoken. I've been taught from a young age that my voice matters and my opinion matters, and it will not be heard unless I use it. And I'm also been taught that people can take advantage of you if you do not use your voice. And throughout the semester, there have been a variety of incidents that has occurred throughout our teams that has been concerning from me and my teammates and our parents, that have been going unaddressed by the athletic department and by Coach Howard herself. But specifically in the past, I did have another email situation with her because she made a rule about 2 tournaments in, saying that we weren't allowed to sit down at any time during competition. And if many of you guys aren't aware of collegiate bowling, our competitions are about 8 hours long, and we don't get any official breaks in between. We get 3 minutes of transition time in between match play. So we compete against one team for a couple of hours, we get 3 minutes to transition, and we compete against another team for a couple of hours. In those 3 minutes, they allow us to take a seat, drink water, fuel ourselves with food and things like that. But Coach Howard decided that we were not allowed to sit down anymore. And she told us, she said the reasoning why was because we needed to boost our endurance. She said that we were not showing that we were athletic enough. She even went to,
it's 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's it. So y'all will sit down for 3 minutes, but the rest of the time you standing up.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't feel comfortable with that. None of my teammates felt comfortable with that.
First of all, I played baseball in college, and when we came in to bat, we sat down.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I don't know if I'm trying to think basketball, football, volleyball. I don't know of any sport where you can't sit down.
Yes, every sport you sit down.
I don't. Okay,
And
that's a new one to me.
Yes, that was an incident that happened. And another incident that happened was we got to the hotel room at our first tournament, and she gave me and 2 of my teammates a key to our hotel room. And we entered our hotel room, and there were only 2 beds there. And we told her that we didn't feel comfortable sharing a bed. And she told us that there was nothing we could do about it because the hotel was fully booked. So we would just have to deal with it. We asked for multiple things. She said there was nothing we can do about it. One of my teammates ended up having to call her mom and have the mom speak to the coach. And when her mom spoke to the coach almost immediately got us another room. So one of us would have our own bed.
So I guess the hotel wasn't full.
Yes. And she, after that, the same time where she initiated the no sitting down rule, she initiated another rule saying that she would no longer be speaking to parents, that she does not want to speak to anybody's parents at any instance. Don't have your parents call me, text me. Don't put your parents on the phone when you're on the line with me. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And I take it y'all shared this with the athletic director, Tiffany Sykes, and others, this back and forth with this new bowling coach.
Yes, we attempted to share it with Tiffany Sykes, but she instructed us that the direct line to speak to her would be through our sports administrator, Mr. Breon Higgins. So we were having basically bi-weekly meetings with Mr. Higgins, just trying to come to some understanding, some consensus, right, some leveling ground. And he consistently told us, along with the athletic director, that the head coach is allowed to do what she pleases, and it is not in their position to try to tell her how to run her team. So Coach Howard used that statement throughout the season. I'm the head coach. This is what I want to do. This is what I said. And when she implemented those new rules, during practice, I was supposed to have an after practice solo session with her. And in the discussion of those new rules, some of my teammates were really upset about having to stand up, obviously. And she ended up getting upset about the fact that we were asking her questions about why do we have to stand up? What's going to happen if our feet hurt? What are you going to do if we sit down? And she actually stormed out of my practice session. So
the head coach stormed out?
Yes, she stormed out of my practice session, and I ended up packing up my stuff and leaving because I was like, okay, it's been about 30 minutes. I texted her and she didn't respond. So I just packed up my stuff because I was like, okay, I guess she doesn't want to practice with me. So this, I guess, is the previous incident that I have had with her personally. And we did have an email situation about that too, because she sent in the emails saying these are the new rules. If the disrespect continues, then there will be consequences. So I asked her if she could clarify what was the disrespect and what are the consequences. Are they still the same from the rules that we signed? And in the rules we signed, the order of consequences would be a written warning, study hall, meeting with the coach, and then dismissal.
Got it.
So
well, Shamoria, all that's unfortunate. Please keep us abreast of what happens, and I would love to hear Florida A&M respond to the things that you've laid out. Good luck in your studies, and let us know what happens.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And again, I want to thank my man Scotty for talking about this on his show. That's why I first saw it. Folks, this here is the announcement of the head coach being hired. And this is interesting right here for me. I'm just reading the press release here, Matt. The head coach graduated from Jackson State, was on the bowling team there from 2017 to 2021, was an four-time All-SWAC member. Played a crucial role in the team's success with 3 SWAC championship appearances. After that, she pursued her master's in digital media from Valparaiso University and is supposed to graduate in May of 2024. Matt, she's never been a coach before. And listen, I'm just laying out what here. I'm not taking anybody's side, but I'm sorry, you've never been an assistant coach. You've never worked in a coaching capacity. To be the head coach is a different requirement. And so what you heard there, just what do you make of what you heard?
Well, first, in terms of her being a coach, I don't know if bowling is a sport where you have to have coached previously.
Hell yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that's helpful, but everybody has to start
there's no sport. Here's the whole deal. There's no sport. I'm sorry. I'll go ahead and say it. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're man, woman, HBCU, PWI. You don't go from being a player 2 years ago to being the head coach 2 years later. That's like saying I was the editor of my college newspaper, and 2 years later I had the requisite experience, and I've never edited anywhere else as a professional to become the executive editor of a newspaper. That don't happen. But I digress. Go ahead.
No, you could be right. And I'm saying I don't know the individual nature of bowling and if it's any different there. But notwithstanding that, I don't understand why the coach would do this. I mean, clearly there's a lot that we don't know, and I have to reserve some judgment not knowing all of the evidence. However, as she was talking to you, I remembered a bill and I looked it up, and Cory Booker actually introduced a bill a couple Congresses ago about a college student's Bill of Rights. And one of the things that was in there is exactly what I was thinking, is that, college students under that law, if it had been passed, would have had protection from retaliation for prioritizing coursework. And what I don't think makes any sense in this case is, one, for the coach to tell the other players, hey, it's okay if you can't come to practice, handle your studies. And then this one student, and I think you asked her some questions that I was thinking brilliantly, is, this one student asked, and then she has a completely different paradigm for her. That belies, obviously, that there was some kind of issue there between them, and there's an issue with fairness. But I mean, FAMU, from a legal perspective, I think may have some serious issues, particularly if there's demonstrated evidence that the football team or whomever else, when they're in a dead week or in comparable circumstances, especially in the gender context, right, are getting accommodations that she did not get. But the larger issue is, if this is off season or they're not in the midst of their season, and this young woman who has a 3.7 GPA, which is extremely hard to do as any student, let alone a student athlete, is prioritizing her coursework, and we're not in the middle of the season, it just seems to me to be creating a problem that doesn't exist for the coach. Even if her and the coach have friction, it seems like the coach is creating a potential legal issue for the school, particularly because she had a scholarship, she's high performing, and this is evidence of animus for her rather than some bona fide reason that she had to be at practice rather than, doing her coursework. So to me, it's asinine. I don't know why the coach would do this, but I think there may be a legal issue for FAMU there.
Joe reminds me of when the Grambling head volleyball coach came in and said there was friction with the players, got rid of all of them. There was a huge uproar. The story went national, and that Grambling coach eventually got fired. And again, I mean, I would love to hear from the university what happened here. Look, let's be perfectly clear, and we've all been there. There are differences with coaches all the time, but I'm sorry, that's your best player on the team, and the person says, "Hey, I got 2 papers due. I gotta finish those papers." I'm sorry, not only that. The coach, she ain't even got her master's yet. She in school.
Right. I mean, yeah.
So you prioritize. I'm sorry, it's bowling. Okay. It's not, I'm not dissing bowlers, but what I'm saying here is this is not like, oh, we're playing in the national championship football game for $100 million. Or we're playing in March Madness where our school might earn $2 to $3 million. Okay. So if you're a coach, I'm sorry, you prioritize the academics of your students, especially if your team has the highest GPA of all athletic programs in the department, if what she said is true.
Well, there's a couple of interesting things that happens here. The Bible says the gifts and the callings of God are without repentance, which means that, you can't be apologetic about the gifts that you get or that you use them. And so she has a gift. She has a gift of leadership, and it lets you know that the whole team followed her. So here's what I know right now. If I'm standing here somewhere, I'm dealing with this, somebody calls me, puts me on Roland Martin, puts me on blast. All I know is that before I hired this woman, I had a bowling team. And now I don't. All of them is gone. Not the one who was just the one who was the leader, who I didn't want those other ones that I didn't respect as much to follow. Not just her. All of them are gone. We don't have a team now. And yeah, to your point, it's not March Madness. It's not the Rose Bowl. It's not $100 million. They're not building stadiums or anything. However, it's incredible that this young woman does not get to prioritize academics like the others did. To Matt's point, she seems to be treating her different than she's treating others. And there's some people out there that don't like being questioned as it pertains to their authority. And this woman sounds like she might be jealous. She's certainly insecure, for sure, okay? And she's found a way to lose the entire team. For that reason only, she could be fantastic. She could be Jesus or right next to him. I could not have her on that team because I couldn't have her as the coach of that team because the whole team is gone. That's just the fact. And anytime you can't prioritize academics because of what amounted to a personal grudge by someone who's incredibly smart, but also leadership oriented, so she will lose her voice. And now FAMU doesn't have a team anymore because of that. Shoot. I could never have that. I would go out of my way if I were them to keep from getting sued. To Matt's point, bring all of those guys back and have it be just like it was, minus that coach.
Michael.
Yeah, Roland, they're called student athletes for a reason because you're a student first and the athlete second. So
actually, I just want to real quick, Michael. That's not what the NCAA was actually embroiled in a lawsuit. And the NCAA lawyer coined the term student athletes in order to shield them in the lawsuit. That's actually where the name came from. So they don't actually believe they're student athletes. They actually believe they are athletes who happen to be students.
You're saying the NCAA or the students believe that?
No. The NCAA,
right?
The NCAA created the phrase student athletes to protect them in a lawsuit
Right.
that was actually filed. If you straight up, if y'all not lying, if everybody who's watching, if you go to my YouTube channel and just type in Taylor Branch and Roland Martin, you will see an interview that I did with Taylor Branch. He wrote an ebook called The Cartel, where he wrote about this here. The NCAA was facing a major lawsuit, and a lawyer for the NCAA created the term student athlete in order to protect the NCAA in the lawsuit. But the reality is, in college sports, there are athletes who happen to be students.
Okay, but there was no championship. The season was over. If I heard it correctly.
No. Just that means the semester was over.
So semester was over. I should say, yeah. Semester was over, and they had finals. So she wanted to prioritize her grades and her tests and things like this and projects. And I'm curious to find out, what are the parents of these other student athletes, as you put it? What are the parents of these other ones who lost their scholarships? What are the parents going to say? How are they complaining to the school? What's the response from the athletic department? And will an investigation be launched into this whole matter?
No.
As well?
I mean, here's the deal. My man Scotty Allscript, he did it on his show today. That's why I first saw it. Then when I saw it, I was like, wow. So I DM'd the sister. And look, we've covered numerous stories here dealing with HBCUs. Yesterday, we just had the Spelman president talk about the $100 million gift they got. So we covered the good, the bad, the ugly. I would love to hear from those parents, but I would also love to hear from Florida A&M. And I would say this here. I would say to the AD, Tiffany Sykes, I would say this to the president, Dr. Larry Robinson, fix this. Because if you are a student athlete and you are trying to prioritize your education, and even if there are differences between players and coaches, let me be clear, there are differences between star football players and head coaches, and the head coach and the basketball players and baseball players. But it doesn't resort to saying, get the hell off my team, and the rest of the team, y'all walk out as well. I'm going to replace all of y'all with walk-ons. That's dumb. And yes, we should have, as this woman said, have a higher expectation for HBCUs in terms of how they treat folks. And so I would love to hear if there's some other side of this story. Would love to hear that. But I will say this here. And again, I don't know this woman, nothing against her, but I'm sorry. There is nobody, okay? Nobody who is that qualified to go from being a student athlete on a bowling team, and they finish bowling in 2021, and 2 years later, they somehow have the requisite experience to be a head coach of a bowling team 2 years later. No, you have to go somewhere and learn under somebody else and learn how to lead, how to actually manage. I'm sorry. I'm just not by. And let me be real clear. I graduated from Texas A&M in 1991, was a reporter for the Austin American-Statesman for 13 months, became a City Hall reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram for 2.5 years. And then I became news director, morning anchor at a radio station, KKDA. So I had professional experience elsewhere before I became news director, morning anchor. You learn how to be a coach by working under somebody else. To me, that's the problem there. But I'm saying, going to a break. We'll be back. And right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. What is it? What we do? Join the Bring the Funk fan club. You take money, go to PO Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. Cash App, $RM Unfiltered. PayPal or Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We'll be back in a moment.
I'm Faraji Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, We're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us.
We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hi, I'm Jo Marie Payton, voice of Sugar Mama on Disney's Louder and Prouder Disney Plus, and I'm with Roland Martin on Unfiltered.
All right, folks, the continuing battle between Israel and Gaza continues, and there's no letting up. President Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, had their first phone call the other day, the first time in 26 days. But when you look at the data where African Americans stand, if you look at social media, it says one thing, but the data, when it comes to polling, is different. A survey was done by Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, where 43% of African Americans believe there should be some form of ceasefire, while 24% of African Americans believe we should not be involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at all. Joining me now is Christopher Schell, a fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and National Security, and also foreign policy expert Asha Castleberry Hernandez. Glad to have both of you here. They're going to be presenting the survey's findings to the Congressional Black Caucus next month. Christopher, I want to start with you. When we look at this, obviously there are, you see through social media this belief that you have a lot of people, a lot of young people who are angry at President Joe Biden for being on the side of Israel on this as well. But are you seeing that in the data? And is there a difference of opinion between younger African Americans and older African Americans?
That's a really good question. I would first like to say thank you very much for having me on your show and talking about my findings. I would say myself and numerous other individuals at the Carnegie Endowment who helped out with this project, we were all essentially stunned by the data because, as you said earlier, there's a general narrative that you see in social media, as you were saying, and you also see on mainstream media. But then looking at empirical evidence, it shows us that, as with most other things, African Americans are not monolithic in their thinking. To that point, we found that on the point when it comes to the presidential election, one thing that a lot of people have been asking questions about is how is the Biden administration and the U.S. government handling the situation affecting just racial minorities and Americans by and large. And one interesting point was that 65% of the African Americans in our sample size, and just so we're clear, we had 800 people who are African American, nationally represented sample size conducted by YouGov, which is a data analytics company. And we found that the overwhelming majority were saying how the way in which the Biden administration is handling this current situation in the Middle East by not going full throttle on trying to tell Israel to push for a ceasefire now and to show restraint in how it's targeting different targets in Gaza, that 65% were saying that they're not really impacted in their sense or their perceptions of how they feel about Biden, that whether or not they will or they won't vote for Biden. But what we are seeing is that amongst independent Black voters and young African Americans who are under the age of 30, we saw that there was about 20% said that they do feel worse about President Biden and how he's handling it. But then when you look at those who are over 30, and those who are Democratic voters, only 10% said they feel worse about President Biden. So what we're seeing is that, yes, amongst certain demographics in the Black community, there is a sense of how the lack of a ceasefire, the lack of pressure that's being placed on Israel is impacting how they think about the situation. But for a lot of other African Americans, that's not really the case, and whether or not they're going to vote. But the data does show is that many African Americans would like to see a ceasefire. You know, the history of African Americans, whether or not it's people who are of African descent or not, we are concerned in terms of foreign policy about human rights being respected and justice. So there is that concern, but it's not to the point where this is an issue that is really on the forefront of Black voters' minds.
Asha, your thoughts? Asha, your thoughts? Yep, you're on mute. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yes. Thank you,
it.
Roland, for having me again. So yes, Dr. Shell pretty much explained it really well, and I'll just have to add on as far as the independent and youth voters who feel worse. I think one of the findings of why they feel that way is the fact of the matter, I think that they're more engaged in various social media outlets that are feeding them depictions of what exactly is going on in Gaza versus those that are over the age of 30. So you are seeing where amongst the youth, social media, different social media outlets are feeding them depictions of, young Palestinians that are being attacked, harm, violence towards them. So that is, I think, what's definitely fueling the Free Palestinian movement effort and making them feel a little bit more connected because of what is being fed to them. Now, another point too that Dr. Shell mentioned is that 48% or more feel just not as connected when it comes to this issue. And I am not surprised about that, because as a foreign policy expert, prior to October 7th, when we look at this 90-year problem, what we find that is that a lot of Black Americans are just pretty much disconnected in terms of looking at this issue, not as informed about the developments that have happened for the past many decades. The issue comes off very complex, hard to understand. So going beyond October 7th, they're taking in a lot in terms of what's being fed to them in media, but they didn't really necessarily come into the conflict with, having a big, strong understanding of the history behind the Palestinian-Israel conflict.
Questions for the panel, Michael?
All right, thanks for coming on, sharing this information. I just had maybe two quick questions. Number one is, in the conversation of African Americans saying they want a ceasefire, et cetera, did they express, or were there any questions to test their knowledge of the history of the conflict going back to 1948, the creation of the state of Israel, or even before that? Number one. Number two, are they also, was there a question in the survey dealing with Hamas returning the rest of the hostages also? We know the Palestinians are being oppressed, that's without saying, but was there, just curious, was there anything, a question about Hamas returning the rest of the hostages?
Yes, that's a really good point. So to your first question about testing the knowledge, we actually did ask individuals if they were knowledgeable of just the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And what's quite interesting is that we found that just in general, when it comes to general sentiments, those who did respond and say that they were either very familiar or somewhat familiar, there wasn't that much of a statistical difference from those who reported not being very familiar. So for example, those African Americans who said that they were very familiar essentially responded in the same manner as those who said that they were not very familiar with the issue. But you're right. I mean, then that does come back to an interesting point about the American public, regardless of race. How informed are they on these general conflicts? I mean, and I would go back to, I would lean on the assumption that, yes, if people are more informed about these issues, they would have a certain opinion. And then to that point, when we look at my data that was saying that 48% of African Americans reported not feeling any type of connection to the conflict at all, I would lean on saying that we had 9% who said that they feel connected to the Palestinian struggle, and 23% said they feel connected to both. And I will go out and say that, yes, I believe that what you do see, like what you're seeing from a lot of our universities, what you're seeing from different educated or the Black intelligentsia, having this, I guess, deeper understanding or knowledge of the somewhat parallels of the Palestinian struggle and African American struggle might lean someone to kind of lean towards or have a certain view on the topic. Now, to your second question about returning hostages, we did not ask that. And to be clear, this was fielded at the end of October, so I know that there's been rapid developments since the survey was conducted, but we didn't ask about returning hostages. We were trying to just try to get like a quick snapshot and not really inundate our respondents with too much information, but that would be something that would be interesting for a follow-up survey.
All right, thank you.
Matt?
Thank you, Dr. Shell and Asha as well. I think Michael kind of touched on this, but my question was really, what do you think contributes to the phenomenon that, Black people who answered in this survey felt more connected to the Israeli faction of this conflict as opposed to Palestinians? And the other question I had for you is, what do you think contributed particularly to the feelings of young voters as it relates to Biden? Was it, what did you get from that data? Just the idea that they felt he's not handling it correctly, or the administration is not messaging correctly? What were your takeaways from that data point?
For sure. I mean, and that was also fascinating as well, going through the data points, seeing that 19% of those felt just connected to the Israeli conflict. So 9% said they felt connected to the Palestinian struggle. 19% said that they felt connected to just the Israeli struggle, and 23% said both. So when you combine those in our sample size, those who felt a bit more connected to the Israel struggle was higher than the Palestinian. So I think this is a fascinating finding. And if I had to just really quickly say some things I think that added to it, I think the first thing would be that, one, there is a religious element that needs to be accounted for. I've been sharing and talking about these findings quite a bit with several individuals around Washington, D.C. And then people have said to me that in parts of Black America, maybe in the American South, or just in like the more religious circles, there is this believing that this is actually a conflict that's biblical, and that we need to align with Israel in this fight. I think there's also another element of just this sense of, like Hamas has initiated this conflict. Like, this conflict started with October 7th, and they are terrorists. And I think in many ways it does harken back to many African Americans who do remember that 9/11, and that, yes, this is similar to the United States fight against terrorist groups. So there is a feeling that, okay, what's happening right now, this is something that is parallel to what we experienced on September 11th in our long war on terror as well. So I think that plays a role in what we're kind of seeing in these findings. And I apologize. Yes, the second question you were asking about age. So for sure, I think Asha touched on it as well. What really is playing a role is, I think, when it comes to age, there also is the education factor. What are people receiving? What are their outlets for information? And I think if you tune into mainstream media versus if you tune into social media, in this case, it would be Twitter in particular, you're taking in different streams of information. And I would definitely say that just in general with the Biden administration, when he first came into office, there was a heavy emphasis on moving away from endless wars and moving more towards human rights. And I know that was really what he kind of highlighted when he first started. And then obviously that somewhat got a little bit sidetracked. You had the war in Ukraine, tensions with China. But I think a lot of people are seeing, I think now my numbers could be off, 20,000 Palestinian deaths. So for some individuals, they might be thinking, okay, focus more on human rights, move away from endless wars. And we're actually kind of seeing where not only are we highlighting, or not only are we looking at civilian deaths, but we're somewhat inching towards a regional conflict. And that's something that I would like to just also mention really quickly as well. We also asked a question about, would you be supportive of sending troops to the region if the conflict spiraled into a broader war? And this is a question that my research has covered, and a lot of interest has been around about how African Americans think about the use of force abroad. You know, the thinking on this amongst African Americans is long-standing about African Americans compared to other racial groups are not very supportive of the use of force abroad. But what's quite interesting is that a third of our respondents said that they would be willing to send U.S. troops to the region if other nations stepped in, or if, for example, Iran stepped in and attacked Israel.
All right, Joe.
Research and for this survey, the risk of asking something that may be similar to kind of what you've answered before. What do you think this says about the evolution of Black thought? By that, I mean, maybe with the point that you made about 9/11, there's some things, of course, that may be surprising, but are these evolutions and consistencies with Black thought, like with Blacks being fairly religious? I remember in the church that I grew up in, we were very pro-Israel, right, as they would call it, et cetera. And so extending Israel a lot of grace. Do you see an evolution in thought that makes a lot of the findings actually make sense and say, yeah, we've been here before, and this seems to be staying the course and going further along that course? Or are there some things that you see, or are there other surveys going back 10, 15, 20 years that actually suggest something different, and that somehow some part of this suggests, as it pertains to Black thought, a turning on its head?
Mm-hmm.
Asha, you first.
Yes, I could just make just 2 points with regards to that comment. In terms of the evolution of thought, I would say that, like, for instance, going back to the religious point, that 19% look as if they support Israel. I'm not surprised with that. I think that's trending into that aspect. So there's not necessarily an evolution, just more of a pattern. Like, for instance, when I think you had many Black religious figures just recently signed a letter saying we support a ceasefire, and they actually, and it was with Leah Tawdry, and many of them actually visited the White House. They felt that this was their time to necessarily get in, and because of the fact that the historical background, how they feel and how this is looked upon as a religious connection or background to it. So, but I will say too, that's a little bit off the thought of it. But what we have to think about too, when it comes to the evolution of it, is looking at COVID all the way up until October 7th. So since COVID-19, you start to see overall, even in the Black community, a lot of comparative politics when it comes to foreign policy, where a lot of Black Americans kind of said, okay, why are you giving assistance to Ukraine or Israel? You're not taking care of us at home. So there's a lot of that going on too as well. That's, I think, part of the evolution in terms of how you look at it, before COVID or before 2020 and now. So that kind of also feeds into the perspective as well. And then last but not least, in terms of 1/3 of Black Americans supporting security, especially if we engage with Iran, I'm actually not surprised at that, because Black people have a history of being very committed to our national security, because we have served in every single war since American Revolutionary War. So national security U.S., although sometimes we come off as not informed, we still have a commitment, especially when it comes to where our national security is at stake, that we have to make a stance on, do something about it. So that to me is a pattern. Then just for those, it might be something new.
Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, Asha covered it succinctly, but I would just really quickly chime in and say that I think there's some brilliant scholars who have written about this from the historical standpoint. Right now, what we're doing at Carnegie when it comes to like really trend tracking with empirical data, African-American public opinion is just fairly new. So hopefully down the line, 30 years down the line, we'll be able to have a trend set, because we're doing this, on a yearly basis. But what I will say is that we have seen from just the historical record in African-American writing that attention and opinion on this conflict has ebbed and flowed. So we saw there were flashpoints in the 60s. So even in the 1960s, you had Black Panther Party, Malcolm X, and in the 80s, you had Jesse Jackson come out in support of the Palestinian struggle, the PLO. At the same time, you have Bernard Rustin. You also have Walter White, who are also in favor of supporting Israel. So even historically, we've seen these flashpoints where you see on both sides of the aisle opinion towards supporting Israeli nationhood and supporting a Palestinian state in the lives of both groups of people. So I think what we're actually seeing is a revival just in general of this sentiment. I think social media plays a major role where now maybe in the 60s, you only had a couple of individuals voicing their opinion, but now we're seeing more individuals voicing their opinion because of social media access to information. But I will actually go on to say that I think that these sentiments on both sides of the aisle has always been there. I think now with just the advent of technology, they're more pronounced.
All right, Danny. Christopher and Asha, I certainly appreciate both of y'all being on today's show. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, we appreciate it. And again, Matt, Joe, Michael, thanks for being on the show as well. I appreciate it. Y'all be sure to have a great weekend, folks. Tomorrow, I'm going to be in Atlanta for the Urban One Honors. Looking forward to being there. TV One is celebrating its 20th anniversary. I was one of the folks who was the face of the network and helped build that network. And so look forward to being there. And then next week I'll be broadcasting from Florida Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So we'll still be bringing the funk. Folks, support us in what we do. Your dollars are critically important for us covering the issues that matter that mainstream media is going to ignore. So you can join the Bring the Funk fan club by sending your check and money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037-0196. Cash App, $RM Unfiltered. PayPal on Martin Unfiltered. Info is RM Unfiltered. Still rolling at RolandSMartin.com, rolling at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can, of course, download the Black Star Network app, Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Xbox, Samsung Smart TV. You can also support us by getting my book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds, available at bookstores nationwide. And folks, if you have not seen the promos, we have our Rolling with Roland interview with the great Lou Gossett Jr., folks. We had a fabulous conversation with Lou, Oscar winner, talked about his long history in Hollywood, a fascinating conversation. You do not want to miss it. So go to the Black Star Network app, or you're going to wait for the restream of the interview. You can also go to our YouTube channel as well. And so it's really great. Folks, that's it. I'll see you guys on Monday right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Holla!
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?